The movie starts with a man named Chris. He works as a deep-sea diver. He is trained in saturation diving and is part of a special team that repairs pipes deep under the ocean. He recently bought a new house and is about to marry a woman named Morag. One day, Chris comes home and tells Morag he has to leave for another mission and will be gone for a month. He asks her to make the house feel like a real home before he returns. Even though his job is very dangerous, Morag lets him go because she knows this is the life he chose. Next, Chris travels to Aberdeen Harbor, which is a main base for North Sea diving work. There, he gets on their ship, which has just been upgraded, and he greets the rest of the crew. After everyone settles in, the dive supervisor, Craig, gives a briefing. He explains that they will be sent down to about 300 feet underwater to replace part of a pipeline. After finishing the job, they will need 4 days to slowly decompress before they can go home. Chris is placed in a team with 2 men named Duncan and Dave. The 3 of them enter a pressurized chamber and try to get comfortable, but Dave is cold and unfriendly toward Chris because they do not know each other. Duncan explains that Dave acts this way to stay focused, since he has 2 children and wants to make it back alive. Later, the chamber doors close, and the pressure begins to increase as the ship moves toward the damaged pipeline. When they reach the oil rig, it feels like they are at the bottom of the world. Craig tells them the dive will take place in total darkness and freezing water. He also warns them never to leave the chamber too early because the gases in their bodies could expand quickly and kill them. One day, Duncan, who is the oldest member of the team, tells Chris and Dave a story. He says that in the past, divers did not have chambers and had to rely only on skill and experience. He also says this will be his final job because the company wants him to retire. That night, Chris receives a video message from Morag, and watching it makes him miss her even more. Later, the ship connects to the oil rig, and they prepare to start the dive. Chris's team is the first to go. They carefully put on their gear and enter a diving pod, which is lowered slowly into the ocean. The pod keeps going down until it reaches the manifold deep below. They open the hatch and test the water, and find that it is extremely cold. Dave prepares to go into the water first, and Duncan helps him get ready. After putting on his helmet, Dave slowly enters the water. Then Chris follows without any trouble. While Duncan stays in the pod to guide them, the 2 divers move down toward the manifold, and someone sends them a power cable. They connect it, and lights turn on around them, but the light is still weak and the seabed remains very dark. Chris carefully moves through the pipes and finds the area where pressure is building up. He begins to fix it while Dave stays close to him. Suddenly, the ship starts showing strange readings, and the operator reports that the dynamic positioning system is failing. Without this system, the ship cannot hold its place. The thrusters stop working, and the ship begins to drift. Craig, the dive supervisor, along with the captain, Andre, and the first officer, Hannah, rush to solve the problem. At the same time, Dave tells Chris to leave the maze of pipes immediately because the mission has been cancelled. Their new goal is to bring the divers back safely before they get trapped on the ocean floor. Next, Chris and Dave reach the pickup point, but their pod is no longer where it should be. Then Chris notices that his cord is tangled, and he may not be able to get out. At the same time, Duncan starts to panic and keeps feeding more cords so the pod will not pull Chris and Dave too hard. Soon, the cord reaches its limit, and the ship finally stops drifting. Chris's tangled cord acts like an anchor, but suddenly his air line breaks, and he loses his main oxygen supply. He switches to his emergency tank, but it only gives him about 10 minutes. After that, his cord snaps, and he falls back down to the seabed while the ship keeps drifting away. Dave climbs back up using his own cord and manages to return to the pod. Meanwhile, Craig loses contact with the divers and the pod. After some time, Dave makes it back and tells Duncan what happened to Chris. Craig then tells Andre to drop the anchor to try to save Chris, but Andre refuses because there are too many pipelines below, and dropping the anchor could cause serious damage. At the same time, Chris is lying alone on the seabed in complete darkness and silence, with only a few minutes of oxygen left. He lights a flare, but it does not help much, and he cannot see clearly. He tries to find the manifold because that is the only place the team might look for him. Back on the ship, the systems start working again. Andre suggests driving the ship manually without the positioning system, but Hannah warns that manual control is only meant for use near ports, and one mistake could put everyone in danger. However, Andre says if they keep drifting, they may never find Chris, so Hannah agrees, and together they take control and stop the ship. Meanwhile, Chris now has only minutes of oxygen left. He keeps searching for the manifold, and after some time, he finds it. He tries to climb it using its rough surface, but drops his flare and has to light another one to continue. He finally reaches the top, but his oxygen is almost gone, and he starts seeing visions of his wife. Back in the pod, Dave believes Chris is already dead, but Duncan refuses to give up. On the ship, they send a remote drone down to search for him. After a while, they find Chris lying on top of the manifold. He is barely alive and struggling to breathe. The drone moves closer, and Craig sees that Chris's eyes are closed and he is not breathing properly. His body is shaking because his brain is not getting enough oxygen. Chris has now been without air for around 8 minutes. At the same time, the positioning operator tells Andre that the system is stuck because it runs through a startup computer. He offers to fix it by rewiring everything, and Andre agrees. Meanwhile, Craig asks the drone pilot, Andrew, to use the drone to bring Chris back. But Andrew refuses because the drone is only designed to carry dead bodies, and using it for a live person is too dangerous. Craig then says he is responsible for Chris and decides to control the drone himself. He carefully tries to grab Chris but fails several times. Then he focuses and makes small, precise movements. Slowly, he guides the drone to Chris's harness and finally grabs it successfully. However, when he tries to lift Chris, nothing happens. He checks the camera and realizes that Chris has clipped himself to the manifold to stop himself from being carried away by the current. It was a smart decision, but now it prevents Craig from moving him. So, Craig gently lowers him back and releases the drone. Now Chris has been without oxygen for about 17 minutes. Everyone starts to lose hope. Then Duncan begins telling Dave a story about how he first met Chris. It happened during a rescue mission when they were sent to recover the bodies of fishermen who had been catching lobsters. They found most of the bodies, but one was missing, and they believed the ocean current had carried it away. So instead of searching longer, they gave the man's wife a shoebox with his personal items inside. Duncan says he does not want that to happen again and refuses to give Morag a shoebox. They have to bring Chris back. Meanwhile, the positioning operator is under pressure as he carefully rewires every cable in the system. After working hard, he finally finishes, and luckily the system starts working again. The dynamic positioning system comes back online. Andre quickly orders the crew to move the ship back toward the manifold. At the same time, power and communication return to the pod. Craig is finally able to contact Duncan again and tells him they are coming back to find Chris. Next, Dave puts on his diving gear and goes back into the ocean. He reaches the manifold, finds Chris, and quickly unclips him. Then he grabs Chris and begins the difficult trip back to the pod. Suddenly, the ship's thrusters fail again, and the pod starts swinging wildly, almost crushing both of them against the structure. But Dave manages to protect Chris and move them to safety. Now Dave has to use all his strength to climb back up the cord while carrying Chris. The entire crew watches nervously as Dave struggles. His arms are tired, but he keeps going because he is determined to save them both. He finally reaches the bottom of the pod and pulls Chris up with him. Then he attaches the winch to Chris, and Duncan pulls Chris inside the pod. Once inside, Duncan carefully removes Chris's helmet and starts CPR. Chris has been without oxygen for more than 29 minutes, but Duncan refuses to give up. He keeps pushing air into Chris's lungs, hoping he will come back to life. After some tense moments, Chris finally starts breathing again. Dave also returns safely, and Duncan helps him remove his helmet. He tells the ship that Chris is breathing but still not responding. Duncan tries to speak to him, but Chris does not react. His brain has gone too long without oxygen. Dave also tries to reach him but gets no response and begins to fear the worst. Duncan feels emotional but is still thankful they managed to bring Chris back at all. Then suddenly, Chris says Dave's name, and both Dave and Duncan feel a huge sense of relief and joy. Craig asks what is happening, and Duncan tells him that Chris is alive and talking. The whole crew on the ship celebrates as their hard work has paid off. The captain congratulates everyone and says they can finally go home. Craig closes the pod hatch and returns the divers to the pressurized chamber. Inside the chamber, Chris has trouble sleeping. Dave checks on him and tells him that he was unconscious for nearly 40 minutes. Chris is shocked and says he feels like he almost left Morag alone, but also says that when he lost consciousness, it felt calm and peaceful, not painful. He thanks Dave for saving his life and finally falls asleep. Dave quietly looks at photos of his daughters and realizes how close he came to never seeing them again. On the second day of decompression, Chris calls Morag. She is surprised to hear his voice because she thought it would take much longer. He tells her there was a problem with the ship but assures her he will be home in a couple of days after the final stage of decompression. After the last day, Chris and the others leave the chamber, but Duncan stays behind because it is his final day at work. He looks around the chamber one last time because it is the place where he always felt most alive, but now it is time for him to retire. Soon after, Chris returns home and reunites with Morak. He tells her everything that happened and how he was saved. She is shocked that he survived something so dangerous. Chris promises her that no matter what happens, he will always come back home. This is the true story of Chris Lemons, who lost his oxygen for nearly 30 minutes during a deep-sea dive, yet he did not suffer any lasting physical or mental damage. Scientists believe his survival may be due to a rare mix of deep water pressure and freezing temperatures, but even today, no one fully understands how he survived. 3 weeks after the accident, Chris, Dave, and Duncan returned to the bottom of the North Sea to finish the work they had started. Thank you for watching. Please like the channel and subscribe if you enjoyed this story.